Probably help if my mic wasn't muted. But we are live. So I was out and about earlier today, and for some reason, I was reminded of a book I have on the bookshelf called Scream and Shout. It's Marine Corps Sea Stories. It's actually the fourth in a group. For whatever reason, I had looked it up, and I had seen this guy on Amazon was trying to sell it for near $3,000. Don't bother doing that. I found a couple copies on eBay. They're about $100 a piece. You can pick up the rest of the series. I think they're roughly, the other ones are about $40, $50 a piece. There's 4 of them, and just some stories. So we're going to jump in. I'm going to read the first story out of Scream and Shout. That's actually the only volume I have. But excuse me, we're going to jump in there and start with the very first story. And it is called oh, good glory, The Lance Corporal. All right, gentlemen, here we go. Trash 6, the non-too-affectionate name given to our battalion CO, was making his rounds in our newly occupied cantonment in the vicinity of Hoi An. We had taken over an area of responsibility formerly held by the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, who had been summoned north to be artillery targets for the North Vietnamese. Trash 6 came to me. Duncan, you're my communicator. What's that little tent on the west side with all the weird-looking antennas? He inquired. I knew only that it was property of the 1st Radio Battalion, a unit which specializes in super-secret work, which cannot be questioned by the peasants outside their sphere of intrigue. Years later, I became involved in such work, and can authoritatively say that what they do, with all the secrecy, is extremely vital and necessarily secret. Sir, that tent belongs to Radio Battalion, and we have no cognizance over it. I offered an explanation. Dadgummit, I'm the CO, and that tent is too close to the wire. I want you to tell them to move it. Sir, that tent is there for reasons unknown to us, and I have no authority to tell them anything. Giving his best shot a look of regal indignation, Trash 6 said, Well, I'll tell you. Tell the bastards. Let's go. Come with me. The two of us trotted off toward the small wall, the tent that was pitched behind its own protection of triple concertina barbed wire. Arriving thereat and seeing no activity, the colonel yelled out, You in there! Come out here! Out emerged a young Marine in jungle utility trousers, boots, and nothing else except a baby face any mother would have loved. He had his M16 rifle in his hands. Yes, sir, said the Marine. Open this wire, pompously said Trash 6. I want to come in there. No, sir. The colonel is not allowed to come in here, responded the kid in a voice which seemed only weeks from the adolescent pitch change. Dadgummit, I'm the commanding officer of this battalion, and I own this camp. That means I own you and whatever you're doing in there. Open the wire. No, sir, unemotionally repeated the youngster. Well, then I'll open it, said the colonel, reaching for what I suppose was a gate of sorts. I'm coming in there. The sobering sound of a round being chambered into an M16 stopped the colonel's judicious actions. We froze and looked down the business end of the rifle muzzle. Heard the kid say in deadly seriousness, Not today, you're not, Colonel. We left post haste, with the colonel asking me in a not-so-regal and obviously fearful voice, Who is that son of a bitch, Duncan? Sir, that was a Marine. That's the very first story. They go on like that. A few here and a few there. I will probably, my goodness, how many are in this one? In this volume, we've got, dozens of them. So I'll probably go on every once in a while, grab one or two of them. We'll go from there. Matter of fact, let's see. The next one in here, British logic. Oh, well, lands. All right, we can do the next one or two of them. So, the following story, British logic. The 41st Independent Commando, Royal Marines, fought alongside American Marines in the 1st Marine Division in North Korea. Things were hectic after the Chinese moved in and forced the Marines to abandon the ground they held and head for Hungnam. At one point, the British were in the lead of an American unit and were moving too fast. They had to be called back a couple of times. When night set in and the column stopped, the Brits immediately started to build fires for cooking, etc. The American colonel went spastic. He roared to the British commander, "Do you realize those fires may attract the Chinese and they will attack?" The unflappable Brit responded, "Well, Colonel," forgive me, I'm not going to go for a British accent. "Well, Colonel, that's the general idea of the whole thing, isn't it?" The British Marines were relieving some Marines at a particular post. The Americans were told to leave certain weapons and ammunition for the British. Don Ivers, acting on the instructions of his CO, Colonel Beale, handed his .30 caliber machine gun to the British, but the Brit sergeant declined his offer by the machine gun, thank you. But Sergeant, the machine gun might come in handy. It would be good if they get up close. The sergeant gave his momentary superior glower to the private and answered, "That's what we have bayonets for, laddie." Interesting. So I wonder then, guys, it seems like the focus, is it just on American Marines? I think it's just on American Marines. All right. Let's do one final one. This one is called Helping Our Allies. The Little Sahara is a friendly place on Lejeune Boulevard, about 3 miles from the main gate of Camp Lejeune. One can hear a lot of good sea stories by sitting there, drinking beer, and listening to Frank Denning, Don Ivers, and others. I can't recall whether it was Don or Frank, but it doesn't matter. The stories were flying so fast that it was difficult to keep credits straight. But I believe this one belongs to Don. After the pullout from the Chosin Reservoir, the 1st Marine Division went into the reserve, south of the 38th parallel. Like good Marines down through the ages, those Marines could always manage to find booze while in reserve, waiting to go back to the line. Don and a friend of his, whom I'll call Lawrence, got a little juiced up and decided to pay a visit to our friends, the KMC, the Korean Marine Corps, that is, who held a frontline position not far from the reserve encampment. They were properly challenged as they approached the Korean positions. Once identified, the KMCs were beside themselves with honor that some gringo Marines would pay them a visit. A Korea lieutenant did the little oriental courtesies of a bite to eat and something to drink, and then with night rapidly descending, the lieutenant offered to show them around the defensive positions. Don and Lawrence, the fire refueled by the Korean libations, accompanied the lieutenant. As they were making their way from position to position, hole to hole, bunker to bunker, Lawrence asked the lieutenant, "Where are the Chinese?" The Korean looked at him and pointed to the north. "They are there." With the azimuth pinned down, Lawrence removed his carbine from his shoulder, where it had been slung since their arrival, and quickly took up a good offhand position. He then emptied his 16-round magazine in the direction of the hated enemy. The Chinese, who had remained quiet for several days, responded in kind. Well, maybe a bit more than just in kind. Small arms, artillery, mortars. It was a veritable 4th of July. After the lengthy barrage, the smoke and dust cleared, and the 2 Americans decided it would be prudent to leave. The lieutenant took his 2 new American friends to the main gate, shook their hands, and looked pleadingly at Lawrence. "You no come, no more, please." And that's where we'll end tonight. 3 different stories out of, again, Scream and Shout, Marine Corps Sea Stories, Book 4. It is part of a series. Go ahead and find them if you want. They were published. I think most of these are coming out of potentially World War II, but Vietnam and Korea. Let's see, the first printing was October 1983. So nothing modern, but some old breed, old salt dog stories, I suppose. All right, gentlemen. Like I said, quick stream. You all have a good evening.